Salut, bienvenue to another French lesson with Anna. This one is about le futur simple. It's the simple future. If you had a chance to check the other videos, you probably noticed that we did one on the near future, futur proche. That's when we express the idea of going to. Today, we're going to look at the other future. That's when we express in English the idea of will. I will be studying this, for example. It's just like everything else in French. The verbs are regular, and they also are irregular. So let's get started, okay? In order to form the futur simple, right, the simple future tense in French, on utilise l'infinitif des verbes et on ajoute les terminaisons du verbe avoir présent. Oh, what does that mean? Okay, simply put, to form the simple future tense, we grab the infinitive of verbs. We don't touch them. So in French, they end in er, re, ir, all of them. Okay. And we are going to, instead of dropping er, re, ir, like we normally do for other tenses, we're going to keep them and we're actually going to add the endings to those infinitives. Okay? And what are these endings? Well, if you know how to conjugate the verb avoir in the present tense, check out the video on the present tense, you know how to add the endings to the futur simple, okay? Because they are the same thing. In most cases, it's the actual verb itself, like je, tu, and il plural, and for the nous and vous, we grab the endings as well, okay? So that means ai, as, we're going to see it in a minute, a, ons, ez, ont, okay? Now, there's a little thing we need to remember. If the verbs belong to the second group, which means they end in re, the E is silent. Vendre, prendre, entendre, attendre, all of those, whether the E is there or not, sound the same. So it's a silent E. That means we don't need it, so we're going to actually drop it from the infinitive. That's what that means. On laisse tomber le E puisque c'est une voyelle muette. It's a silent E, doesn't need to be there, get rid of it, okay? But for the other ones, keep everything, okay? So, for regular verbs, again, we look at the ending er, re, let that E go for re, and then ir. And then we add for je, we grab the endings from the verb avoir in the présent, the present tense. For je, we add ai, e. For tu, we add as, as, which is the a, we don't pronounce the s. For il, elle, and on, this is the third person singular, we add a. Then for nous, ons, which we pronounce on. For vous, ez, right, ez, e. And for il and elle, plural, ont. So we have the ont. These are the endings. They never change. Whether the verbs are regular or irregular, we keep these endings for every single one of them. So how does that look? Well, let's look at the regular verbs, and let's look at the first group. The first group is the group that ends in er. And as I said, grab the infinitive, do nothing to it. So let's bring the verb parler, to talk or to speak. You're going to keep parler as is, and then you're going to add the terminaison, the endings. And this is what it looks like. Je parlerai. Notice the infinitive is there. We didn't touch it. We just added the endings. Tu parleras. It's this re sound that indicates that the verb is in the future. Notice that in French, we do not have a word in here that translates into will, like we do in English. In English, I will say, I will speak. That will does not exist when it comes to verbs. We don't need that extra word. Instead, in French, it's this re ending that tells me that it's in the future. Okay? So you have to pay attention to the re sound and what the ending sounds like. There's a reason why you have to pay attention to the ending, and you will see it once we do the conditional. Okay? Now, tu parleras. Okay? You will speak. Il parlera. He will speak. It's the ra there. Okay? Elle parlera. She will speak. On parlera. We will speak. Then, nous parlerons. Parler is still there. We just add the ONS. Nous parlerons. We will speak. Vous parlerez. You plural or the formal polite form. You will speak. And then il, masculine form. Elle, feminine form. That means they, as it's the plural form. Parleront. Be careful, it's not ENT. ENT is for the present and some other endings, not the case of the futur. For the futur, the il and elle plural is ONT. Il and elle parleront. So that takes care of all the ER verbs that are regular. They will all follow this rule. Then we look at the second group. And the second group is our lovely RE. And remember, that E being silent, we don't need it. So we get rid of it. That's why it's underlined over here. So let's look at a verb such as entendre. That means to hear, okay? So entendre is going to look like this. J'entendrai, okay? So I dropped that E because, again, there's a vowel here. So j'entendrai, I will hear. Tu entendras, you will hear. Il, elle, on entendra. So that's the he, she, or we will hear, right? Nous entendrons. Okay, there's a lot of on sounds there, right? Entendrons, we will hear. Vous entendrez, you will hear. Il and elle, they plural, entendront. Again, the endings are always the same. Never change. If some stuff will change, the endings will always be here for you and we do nothing to them. Okay, so that takes care of the second group, RE verbs. Remember, drop that E and you have the futur simple. So what happens to the third one? Not much. It's pretty much the same idea. Okay, so the third group ends in IR, like finir, to finish. Keep the verb as is. Don't drop anything. We just leave it that way. And we add the endings to that verb. Okay, so it looks like this. Je finirai, which means I will finish my work. Tu finiras, you will finish. Il finira, elle finira, on finira. Okay, we will finish, he will finish, she will finish. Nous finirons, we will finish. Vous finirez, you will finish. And il and elle plural, they finiront, they will finish. Okay, so that takes care of the regular verbs. Now, like I said, just like everything in French, there are a few verbs that decided to not follow the rule, okay? So they sort of exist by themselves. Some of them sort of follow a pattern, but you really need to memorize them because you can't really use any set of rules to conjugate them, okay? But the good news is that they share the same endings, as I said. The endings never ever change for futur simple. So, les verbes irréguliers changent le radical. That means they change the root, the radical, okay, which is their infinitive, but the endings will still the same. What are the most common ones and the ones you're going to see a lot? Well, this is the list. Avoir, to have. Notice it ends in IR. So if we were dealing with a regular verb, we would just keep avoir and add the endings, and we would have avoirer, avoira, avoira. Well, that doesn't exist. It's not French. It changes to or, A-U-R, okay, or, and then add the endings. Être, to be. I think I've mentioned this before, but I will say it again. Être is the only verb in French that will always be irregular. No matter what, this guy does not follow any rule whatsoever. So être changes to ser, S-E-R. Aller becomes an ending in a way, okay, changes to ir, okay, I-R. Faire, and aller, as we saw, is to go, okay. Faire, to do or to make, it's pronounced the same, faire, okay, faire, but it's going to be a silent E, but it's spelled differently, F-E-R, so it becomes ferai, fera, etc. Envoyer, to send, envoyer. It changes completely the O-Y-E-R here at the end, and it becomes envers, okay, so double R, enverrai, etc. Vouloir, to want, changes to voudre, okay, so V-O-U-D-R. Pouvoir changes to pour, okay? P-O-U-R-R. Notice that some of them only have one R, others have a double R. Devoir, to have to, the idea of must, right? It's devra, okay? Savoir, to know something, it's usually related to knowledge, is saur, and this one only has one R, S-A-U-R. Venir, okay, becomes viendre, all right? To come, so venir means to come. Voir, which means to see, becomes ver, double R. Courir, which means to run, only has one R in the infinitive, but becomes a double R in the futur, cour. And mourir, which means to die, becomes mour, just like cour. Okay? So these are irregular verbs. We must practice them. We must memorize them. There's no other way around it. And just to give you an example of how they work, notice that I said the endings never change. So to that list of irregular verbs I just gave you, add these endings and you got your futur simple. It's actually a very, very easy tense to learn in French. But here's the example of the first one, the verb avoir, to have. We saw that avoir changes to aur, A-U-R, and when you conjugate it, becomes j'aurai, I will have, tu auras, you will have, il aura, he will have, elle aura, she will have, on aura. But this here, this on, notice there's an N followed by an A. So we need to do that liaison that almost makes them sound like one word. On aura, okay? On aura, so we will have. Nous, and here again, that S followed by a vowel, nous aurons, becomes nous aurons. There's a Z there, right? Nous aurons, we will have. Same thing for vous. Vous aurez, you will have. Same thing for il and elle, plural. Ils auront, they masculine will have. Elles auront, they feminine will have. And that's really le futur simple en français. Keep the infinitive, drop the E for RE verbs because that E is silent, and then just add the verb avoir endings from the present tense, which are AI, AS, A, ONS, EZ, ONT. Keep checking. I'll be uploading some exercises for you to practice with the answers so that you can see if you got them right or wrong. And keep checking the videos because we will have more on some other grammar aspects in French lessons with Anna. À la prochaine.